Our last video here covers solving an equation that has an absolute value in it, so absolute value equations. So just a reminder here, to solve an absolute value equation, remember that the expression inside the absolute value bars could be positive or negative. So that's going to create two separate equations for us. So if we look at the first example, this means that positive x minus 2 could equal 3, or negative x minus 2, and notice how I put that in parentheses because this negative gets applied to both, could equal 3. Okay, so here's my positive version, and we could still put that in parentheses. The positive just doesn't change it. And then here's my negative version. So two equations, whatever's inside the parentheses is what could be positive or negative. And we solve. So we're going to, here we get x minus 2 equals 3, add the 2. So x could be 5. And here we need to distribute the negative. So negative x plus 2 equals 3. Negative x equals 1 and divide by a negative 1. So x could be a negative 1. And we can always do a quick double check, right? If x is 5, 5 minus 2 is 3, the absolute value of 3 is 3. Or we have negative 1 minus 2 is negative 3, but the absolute value of negative 3 is also positive 3. So you can also do a quick check to make sure that your two numbers work. So let's do one then where we have absolute value of a quadratic. We have x squared here. So we're still going to set this up the same way. This value could be positive x squared minus 3x, and then that would equal the negative 4x plus 6. Or it could be negative x squared minus 3x, and that would still equal negative 4x plus 6. So really just make sure you get those equations set up correctly to start with. One positive, one negative. Now when it's positive and when we distribute a positive, nothing changes, but it's still important to think about both of those are going to get multiplied by a positive. So here, if we move everything, get everything set equal to 0, because we've got our x squared. Add the 4x over to its like term, and then just subtract 6. So x squared plus 1x minus 6. And again, you have your methods of factoring, completing the square quadratic formula. This one factors x plus 3 and x minus 2. So this could be a negative 3 for x, or it could be a positive 2 for x. Okay. But then remember, because of absolute value, we have another equation to solve where what's inside those brackets could have been negative. So here's two answers if it was positive, and then we're going to get two answers if you have this negative. So now I need to distribute the negative. That'll turn that into a positive 3x. And then this time, I want this to be a positive x squared. I don't want negative. So let's go ahead and move from left to right this time. So add x squared and then subtract the 3x. We don't normally go in that direction, but I want that x squared to be positive. So our 0 will be first, and then we'll have x squared minus 7x plus 6. And again, nicely, this one factors to get our two answers. So we have a total of 4 answers because we have a squared, but that squared could have been positive or negative. So that doubles the number of answers that we could have. So there's a square root example. And let's end with a quick application. So a ski club charters a bus for a ski trip at a cost of $480. So the bus costs $480. To lower the bus fare per skier, the club invites non-members to go along. After 5 non-members join the trip, the fare per skier decreased by $4.80. How many club members are going on the trip? So we started with a total for only club members. So for ski club members, cost $480. So for M, let's say the members times whatever the cost is each person, that total was $480. So we have a couple of variables already. M is the members, because they said then after that they invite non-members. And then X is the cost per person. Okay, so the number of members times the cost per person equals $480. So $480 is the first total. So that means if only members went, the cost per person I could divide by M, divide by the number of people. So that cost per person would be 480 divided by the number of members. Okay. But they said that that cost now is going to decrease by $4.80 after 5 non-members join. So I can subtract this, I can decrease that number by $4.80, but I also then have to consider that 5 more people came. So let's think about how we would get the total cost of the trip. So equals a total. Okay. The total is the cost times the number of skiers, or the number of people who went. Well, we said the cost was 480 divided by M, but it then decreased. So the cost was that 480 divided by M, and then it decreased by $4.80. And then the number of skiers was M, but we had to add 5 members to that, or 5 non-members, so we had to add 5 to that. And then equals our total, which was $480. So a couple different steps in the thought process there. But now I can solve for M, for how many members are going on the trip, because that's what it's asking, how many club members. And you don't have to use M here, you can use X if that makes more sense to you, but we used X for the cost, so we used X as a different variable. So to solve here, we do have a fraction, but let's go ahead and let's FOIL first, and then we'll see what happens with the fraction. So if we multiply 480 over M times M, here's what that will look like. 480 over M times M. So those M values are going to cancel out, but I'm going to leave it like that for now. And then I would multiply 480 over M times positive 5. So we'd multiply 480 times 5, which is 2,400. And then that's still going to be over M. And then if I come inside here, that'd be negative 4.8 M. And if I multiply the outsides, it's a negative 24. And then it's equal to 480. Okay. Now, like we said, these two M values in my first term, they're going to cancel out. So there's no more M there. Okay. But we still have 1 in the denominator. So let's see, do we have any like terms? We do have 480 does not have an M, and negative 24 does not have an M. And if I want to get it set equal to 0, I can move that 480 over as well. So really, if I subtract 480, that's going to cancel out that first 480. So that's going to be gone, that's going to be gone. And then we're left with 2400 over M minus 4.8 M minus 24 equals 0. So there's fewer terms. And then now taking care of that M out of the denominator, let's go ahead and multiply everything times M. So multiply times M times M times M. So, and then the 0 times M, but that's going to be 0. So again, here the M's cancel, so we're left with 2400. And then negative 4.8, and this is going to be M times M, so M squared minus 24 times M equals 0. And then I want this in standard form, so I'm going to write it, and I'm going to write it off to the side here so I don't run into your assignment. So in standard form, it'd be negative 4.8 M squared, and then negative 24M, and then the positive 2400. All right, now this is kind of ugly to factor. You could do the quadratic formula right away, but there is a GCF here. You can divide all of these by negative 4.8. So if we do that, we factor out, or we divide. Now in this case, because we're only dividing by a number, we're not dividing by a variable, we can just divide everything because we're not dividing off an answer. So that's one way that just dividing a number does not change anything. If you divide by a variable, that's going to change and get rid of one of your answers. But in this case, if we just divide, we can get m squared, and then we get a positive, and if we divide there, we get 5m. And then if we divide here, we get negative 500 equals 0. So you could have used the quadratic formula if you wanted to with our original here. You should still get the exact same answers we do. But now with what we have after we divided by negative 4.8, we can factor this, or you could use a quadratic formula again. And this is a positive 25 and a negative 20. That works for factoring. So then if we solve that, we get negative 25 as one of our answers. And positive 20 is one of our answers. Now remember, our question was how many members could go. So here's a case where we have two answers, but in terms of numbers of members, only one of those answers makes sense. It does not make sense to have a negative number of members go. So in that case, this answer just doesn't relate to what the question's asking. So the positive 20 is the number of members. So there were 20 members on the trip. Good. So lots of algebra, but just kind of focus, and if it seems like a lot of steps, just remember it's all the algebra that we know. We just might have to repeat the process or combine two different strategies that we know. So don't let the length of a problem kind of get in your head. You know how to do all of these different steps. So here is your practice for lesson 1.6. It's on page 128, and it's all odds, so you can check it all in the back of the book. If you have questions, as always, please make sure you're checking your answers and then letting me know if you can't figure out how to get to those answers.